Hi guys, I hope everybody is doing well. I'm here to talk a little bit about textbook publishing because that was the topic I was assigned for this presentation. So I've created a PowerPoint that's going to be pretty quick that answers some questions that I had about this topic myself. So I hope it's pretty useful. So I'm going to share my screen to this video now. And show you guys what I came up with for this presentation. So as I was beginning my research here, I noticed that, this is a large topic and it's not one that we've really touched in class very much yet. So it's not something that I'm familiar with just in like my own career. Like I've never explored this before. So I had a lot to learn and was pretty overwhelmed actually when I got started thinking about all the different things to talk about, like book proposals and publishers and contracts and royalties and all these like different elements of publishing a textbook. So I tried to actually narrow things down to kind of like 4 major questions. So this was a weird thing. I just Googled like textbook publishing, and you know how when you make a Google search it'll suggest questions based on kind of what you put in the box, and these were some of the questions that I saw as like reoccurring that just regular people on Google had, and they were questions that I had too, so I thought it would be kind of interesting to explore the answers to some of these questions because I feel like you probably have them too. So a lot of people were asking about first self-publishing. Others who weren't compelled to self-publish were talking about how do I submit a proposal to a publisher if I want to go that route. How long does the process take was another big question. And then of course, I think the main question was how much money will I make if I publish a textbook? And I think there is a sort of myth that surrounds the textbook publishing industry because of how expensive the books are often. I think we think that somebody's making bank on this, and I don't know if that is necessarily the author based on my research here. I'll get to that in a few minutes, but yeah, money was a big thing. So I have linked here the Textbook and Academic Authors Association website. They have a whole collection of presentations about all these different topics in the world of textbook publishing, and they were super informative, and it's free. You have to make an account through their website. I'll show the website at the end of the presentation, but if you make an account there, you can explore so many different like really formal presentations that are really specific to these questions and much more. So I'll cover these 4 today briefly, but if you have some interest in something a little bit more specific, I highly recommend this resource. And in fact, many of my points today will have utilized things I found on that website and through that organization. So let's maybe first talk about this idea about self-publishing. When you Google self-publishing or when you just do any search on it, you're going to get a lot of fiction writers or like memoir, like people who want to publish something that's like not textbook. So it was, you have to kind of like keep that in mind if you do some of this research on your own, that you really need to be looking at what's going on with textbooks versus just like books or even academic books, because I think it's a little bit different. I think based on what I'm understanding, if you were to self-publish a novel, it probably isn't, I think, the best way to get your novel out there or to make money. You kind of just end up on Kindle for 99 cents or something like that usually, I think, when you self-publish, and there's no marketing for you. You're doing all that work yourself, and if it's a novel, there's so much competition, and it ends up, I think, probably not being in your best interest. But a textbook seems, based on what I'm reading from people who have done this, it seems to not be as like taboo to self-publish a textbook for a couple of reasons. So I have there's this piece on why you should consider self-publishing and print on demand. So it's like a article for that type of publication that I found through that website I mentioned before. And the article or the presentation was pretty balanced, so I'll go over some of that information. Some of the pros of self-publishing is that you can get your information out quickly. We'll talk about this in a second, but if you go through a publisher, it seems like it's probably going to take you like till you're ready to retire, basically, to get your book published. Like, it takes a really long time. So if you self-publish, you get it out quicker. Usually people can purchase it for a cheaper price, so it depends on what you care about, like if you care about that kind of thing. A commercial publisher will own the intellectual property unless you somehow create some sort of copyright beforehand, which they may not accept. And they also take 89 to 90% of the profit. So if you're in this for some kind of monetary gain, you might make more money with self-publishing. The problem with self-publishing, or just things to keep in mind, is you have to create all the stuff. So if you're good at that, maybe you're good at that, but it's a lot. Like the cover, the formatting, the proofreading, all that marketing. There's a lot of software involved, so it could be a learning curve. And it's true that a self-published book may not have the same level of prestige, obviously, because it doesn't go through the same amount of rigor, or I don't know, there's not like the name behind it. It's just kind of you sending it out. So there, again, obviously pros and cons to choosing this method for getting your work out there. It kind of just depends on your intention. So should you self-publish? Maybe, if you have something that you want to get out there quickly, that you want to be more accessible, and that you want to own. So it could work. Now, the other route, submitting to a publisher, is an option, because maybe you don't want to market it. Maybe you're not able to create a textbook cover, or all these different reasons. Maybe you are looking for that prestige. Plenty of reasons to look for a publisher. You have to submit a book proposal to the publisher. Now, this article I'm referencing here, Think Like a Shark Tank, the author is referencing that show Shark Tank, where entrepreneurs come in and try to get investors to invest money in their grand idea for the newest, I don't know, sponge, or you see crazy things on there, better ways to brush your hair, even it's just weird stuff people are trying to sell, and so they're trying to get people to invest. So she likens that process to selling a book proposal. So this is something on the TAAA website. They actually have linked all these different academic textbook publishers and their criteria. It's just like what we've encountered as we've approached journals for submission. Everybody kind of has their own requirement for what you send in. You can't send the same proposal to 5 different journals, because they all have different needs and whatever. So that's the same thing here, but these are just some general guidelines from Rachel Tour, which I think I would apply probably anywhere, because it's really about your attitude. She talks about not contacting publishers until you really do have material prepared. We talked about sometimes if you're submitting to a conference, you may not have the paper written yet, but you what did we say, fake it till you make it with your proposal. She recommends that you don't do that for a book, because that's a long, obviously a little more involved effort. So if a publisher is going to take the time to read your proposal, you really need to have the goods to back it up. So have a product. She also, the same business advice, have your elevator pitch ready, know what sample that you could provide, but make sure it's really good. Be engaging and to the point, be gracious with rejection. So those are things that, are, I don't know, life skills, but they apply, I think, to that process of sending in proposals. Now, this is just kind of the general, mentality to have, but I have another piece here that I actually want to read the quote from. This is about how to make a textbook proposal, and this is a longer article that I recommend reading, or a presentation that you can listen to or read. It's available both ways through that TAAA website, and I've linked it at the end of the presentation. But anyway, the author here says, one of the most misunderstood aspects is that the academic author naturally is most concerned about is their content and their particular approach for the course that they're serving. And this is not what publishers want. We think we need to justify it this is how it would work in a intro to astronomy or whatever you're writing class. But she said that what publishers want to know is if it's marketable, competitive, and if you can have multiple editions. So you kind of have to turn off your academic brain and put on your your business marketing, accounting, whatever kind of hat for a second and think about what this does to serve the publisher, not what it does to serve the students who will read it. And that seems kind of like awful, but because you're like, I wrote it for people to use, but you're selling it to someone who's going to produce it, and they don't really care if how it's working like theoretically. They want to know how it works practically and how they can continue to make money off of it. So you have to kind of change the way you think about your proposal here. It's about like, this is how I can produce money for you, publisher. So it may feel shady, but I think it's just a different way to think about your work. Moving on here, how long does it take? So again, self-publishing goes a little quicker. Sending it to a publisher seems to take much longer. I have an infographic here from Oxford, and I actually have to exit my PowerPoint to show it to you because it's so long. How to publish a textbook in 25 steps. Usually you see these things that are like how to do like 10 steps, 8 steps, or 12 steps. You can stop, your addiction in 12 steps, but to publish a textbook is 25, which is like twice as many steps. So like this to me was just, I know the purpose of an infographic is to make it, clear. This is overwhelming, and I'm not even going to go through all 25 steps, but it just, you keep scrolling. So my response to the question, how long is it going to take? A really long time, probably, if you are doing this through a publisher. That can be okay, though. Like, if you know that going in, that your project is going to be one that you're in for the long haul, and the prestige is worth it to you, and the having someone else take care of the details, whatever reason, it's not a bad thing. It's just something to keep in mind. The very last point I want to talk about is the money. So again, this was like one of the most asked questions on the internet. How do I make money off of this? And so, it's a big question, but I had a hard time finding like actual answers to it. I read several blogs, which are kind of cool because they're anecdotal, and so the person who was writing it had been through the process, so they were explaining like, this is how much money I made, these are the mistakes I made. But that's useful, but that's a one-off situation too. So I was trying to look for like some qualitative data to explain, in addition to quantitative, to like have some kind of like bigger, picture for what to expect, and it was hard to find. What I would say generally, though, is in response to, will I make money on this? Almost everyone says you might, but probably not. Like, the general consensus is, it's very hard to make it to the level, like I was reading some statistics somewhere, which again, they seemed it was on a blog, so it was hard to trust, but like less than 1% of textbooks on the market actually make money. So it's hard to say like whether or not you're going to be in that tiny section of profit, or that margin. So probably not a lot. There are other benefits, obviously, like if you're in academia, if you publish a textbook, I think that's probably your like assurance for tenure. There's all these other reasons, and this is another, the first point I have here. It's technically, you write this book to start a conversation. Usually, if you want to make money, you have to make, I guess, the newest sponge and take it to Shark Tank. That's how I guess a book proposal really is kind of different than a product that you are an entrepreneur for, because it's not, like, usually the point of it isn't to make money, it's to fill a gap in a conversation. So that being said, it looks like if you make money through publishing, especially if you do it through like traditional routes, you get an advance. So that's decided in a contract. You have royalties that's decided in a contract, and all that varies. So there's so much to think about with contract deals. The devil is in the details was a piece that I learned the most from, I think, about like what to look for in a contract. But it is so, like, you feel like you've been to law school once you start looking through how to figure out what kind of contract to sign and what stipulations you need. So Anyway, I have my works cited here at the end. And then finally, the last website I wanted to show you guys is this TAAA website. So it really is useful. You can go to resources here and see all kinds of things that are available for free. So thank you guys so much for watching. And